and Wim Wenders, who is not only the head of the European Film Academy.
You see, I can't look at all the Academy Awards and too much of me. So.
Yes. I wonder. Was anything about
What was the daftest or the most awful thing you had to do in those years before you chose what you did yourself?
I had to sit in a chair and not be able to do anything. I went into contract when I was 18 years old at Warner Brothers, and I was blacklisted by the time I was
18 and a half.
no, about 22, 23. And the hardest thing was knowing that I might never be able to make a movie. You know, and I want to make movies. I was blacklisted not because I was a communist, but because I was difficult. I wouldn't take direction. But anyway, I was blacklisted, and I had to sit in the chair and make a decision that I was going to keep getting drunk at parties and telling people, you know, how I was going to make the great film for 15 years, or whether I was going to really sit in the chair and really get it together and try to figure out if I ever got out of the chair, you know, could I make a movie? And my example was one night I was really depressed, and I said, I'm never going to make a movie. It was about 8 years ago. And I watched a fly beat itself to death in the window, looking for a way out. And I thought, I'm not going to do that, you know. But if I get up out of this chair, I'm going to be ready to direct a movie.
Was, I think, something that we hope could happen again, in the sense that why it hit a nerve, in my view of it, was because it was a passion for freedom from social taboos, and freedom from freedom from all convention, and which I would say if there's anything that Dennis Hopper doesn't have an understanding of, it would be convention, and lucky him. As much as anything, it was a movie that made me want to make movies.
I loved westerns more than anything else, and this for me was the first modern film that used space in the same way. And you just go, and you doesn't matter how far you go and where you stop and where you go the next day. They were so carefree.
It was beautiful the way they put this thing together with a new feel, with this particular music, and the way it moved across the country. It was a beautiful thing, and it hadn't been done before.
The songs from that film had an impact on me, like The Pusher or, you know, Born to Be Wild. You know, the Steppenwolf, you know, the music from that film was kind of like a soundtrack of an era.
This is the end, my friend. I picked those guys up, the two guys that shot us here. I found them in a gas station that morning. So the guy had a big goiter around the side of his neck, and so they were in the filling station. And I said, get those guys with you.
Oh my God. I'm going for the light. I'm gonna get up. Go back. We're ready, guys.
I'm telling you the reason. I can't ever talk more than a fucking sentence. The reason that you're explaining the poem to him is because you want to indicate to this guy that he does not understand Kurtz, that Kurtz is a strange man. What you're trying to express is that he's kind of in the twilight zone. That his twilight zone is our twilight zone. It's America's twilight zone. So that he will not judge him. So that he will accept him as a great man and help him.
Well, kid, refused to be there the same time I shot, so he would work one night and then I would come in the next night and work. The time was rather annoying, but I think it was a great service to me, very honestly, because I think I've been very uptight, and it was a very practical thought of mine, really.
This is dialectics. It's very simple dialectics, 1 through 9, no maybes, no supposes, no fractions. You can't travel in space, you can't go out in space, you know, without with fractions. What are you going to land on, 1/4, 3/8? What are you going to do when you go from here to Venus or something? That's dialectic physics, okay? Dialectic logic is, there's only love and hate. You either love somebody or you hate them.
With the narcotics and with the alcohol, you never know who's coming out of the trailer. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde thing.
It's very difficult to ask some other questions or to make people speak after the emotions the film has already given us. But I'm sure that two artists like our friends here, Hopper and Wim Wenders, will be able to add to this already so beautiful documentary. There are some points of connection also between their travelers, because they have been traveling the world. He's German and he has been working. Seed idea that told Dennis Hopper and then Wim Wenders about their special nature, the fact that they wanted to do different things, the fact that they were not destined to a normal life of clerks or bankers or whatever the other thing you say at the beginning of the film. So, would you please comment on the idea of ideas as seeds for something different that is in their new film? Thank you.
You want to start this?
Let me ask him a question. When did you decide to become a director? How did that come about?
That happened after my fourth film. Because I'm really a failed painter, and I had to live with this fact that as a painter I was a total failure.
See, I've never realized that yet.
There you go. When did it hit you?
That I was a failure as a painter? Well, the first time I was on, actually, I started out in the theater at 13. I mean, not a professional theater, but doing Shakespeare in San Diego at the Old Oak Theater in Balboa Park. And then when I was 18, I went under contract with Warner Bros. And the first day I was on a movie set, first day I was directing on a movie set, I realized that there was a director. In the theater, I knew there was a director, but once you got on stage, the director left and you were okay. But in the movie, every line you said, somebody was saying, cut, do this again, do this way, and so on. And I thought, I want that job. You know? That's the creative job of the movies.
Yeah. I only directed theater once, and I loved it until they played it for the first time. And then I hated it. Because I was just sitting there. I was one of all these people, and I watched the stage, had nothing more to do, and they did everything differently. And I just felt like walking away. It wasn't my job. But did you ever direct theater too?
No, I've never directed theater.
I don't. I wasn't kidding about the fourth movie, because it took me 3 films to understand that filmmaking was not just a bubble or a dream, but that it was something that I could actually continue doing. And it took me, most of all, it took me a complete failure in order to understand that I really wanted it. It took actually the worst film that I ever made to make me want to do it right.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about Scarlet Letter. Did you ever see that?
No.
Thank you. Anybody here ever saw it? Thank you. No.
Did you do the American Friend after that?
No, the American Friend
was...
The fifth film was Kings of the Road, and the American Friend was two later. When we did that, I already signed director when I got into the hotel as a profession. That was a proud statement. For the first three films, I wrote different things in it. What are you writing when you're in a hotel and they ask your profession?
Actor. It covers just about everything. It's the way I make my living. I don't make my living at directing or painting. I hardly sell anything. So I sell a few photographs, but it's not enough to live off.
We were talking before of the fact that the second film is a very difficult one. Why do you think so? Is it just, this was the same thing for you and for him? I mean, that the second film was the hardest to make?
Yours was the last movie, right?
Well, my first film was Easy Riders. It was very successful, and I went back and made the movie that I wanted to make as my first movie, the last movie, which stopped my career, and I didn't direct again for 10 years. I couldn't get a job directing, not because I didn't want to.
Did it ever hit you that it was the wrong time?
It hit me at the time. You're only as good as your last movie. And the great thing about Wim is, Wim has been beaten down, and he goes right back and makes a movie. You know, and continues to make film, and wonderful films. So I could never get the financing to go on and make films as a director.
And everybody was supposed to make a 15-minute short film. And we had a certain budget, and I figured out that if I did every shot only once, and if I shot in 60mm black and white with the same budget, I could stretch it to 100 minutes. But only one take. And that's what I did. But nobody ever saw the film because I used all the music that I liked. And I didn't know that you had to pay for the rights. I used everything in the book. Dylan, Elvis, Beatles, everything. And of course that doesn't work. So I didn't count it as the first film. And then I made The Goalkeeper's Fear of the Penalty, which was my easy ride anyway because people liked it. It wasn't successful, but still people liked it. And then I fall into that trap thinking now I can do whatever they want, whatever they want. And I made a film that they wanted from me, and that was a big mistake, and that was a disaster. We shot that film, you know the novel, Scarlet Letter?
Yeah.
It takes place 17th century New England, and we shot it in Spain. And of course all the Puritans were Spanish Catholics. And we shot it in one of those villages where they make the spaghetti westerns, which are all shot in Spain, not in Italy. I don't know if anybody of you ever realized that. Because I know, because we painted the western village black, so it would look like Salem, Massachusetts. We didn't have more money than to paint it all black. And after that, for 10 years, every Italian western took place in a black village. So that was the proof that they made their movies in Spain. And anyway, that film was a total disaster, and it led me to think that I shouldn't really be doing this because I had made something that didn't belong to me, it wasn't from the heart. It was not about anything that had anything to do with my own experience. It was a 17th century novel that took place in the 17th century. It had a woman as a hero. It So what? Yeah, but I had no right to talk about the life and the world of a woman. I realized while I was making the film, it was all completely pretentious and preposterous. The whole thing.
Have you seen the other version that Hollywood made like 10 years ago?
Mine was better. Mine was better. It was that bad. And so I realized that if filmmaking was worth anything, it couldn't be any of that. It had to be about my own experience, it had to be about something I knew, and it had to be about something that really counted for me, and that there was something at stake. That's what you did with Easy Rider. There was a lot at stake there. So, and that's why it took me 3 films in order to find out that filmmaking was about, create or die. If you're not willing to die with it, and if you're not willing to give everything, then you better not do it. And that was my fourth film. That was Alice in the Cities. But your experience was very different with the last movie.
I was now make my second film. I could have made anything I wanted. I wanted to go back and make the film that I wanted to make first, the last movie. By that time, my idea about filmmaking had totally changed. So I had taken to heart Godard's thing that a movie has a beginning, middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. Well, I made a movie like that. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. So I don't know what would have happened with it, but I do know it stopped my career. And it's important, I think, in those moments, whether you have a big success or whether you have a big failure with your first film, at that moment to reconsider, like on his 4th movie, where you decide what your priorities are. At the moment, after I made Easy Rider, I should have made something that I knew was going to be successful rather than taking a chance the way I did. But I mean, it's nice thinking about it now, but you couldn't have told Dennis Hopper that then.
Yeah, but there's something about it, about success, if you look at it in hindsight, and about failure. And I come to terms with failure because I realized it was more important than success in hindsight. I mean, you like success so much more, but if you have only success, you're living in a parallel universe, and you don't have to defend anything anymore. And it's only if you have a failure that you have to define who you are, and you have to defend what you do, and all of a sudden, you grow. And if you have one success after another, you're doomed to not even know anymore who you are. That was the last thing I thought anybody would clap.
Maybe he told them to every journalist, but I was under the impression I had the whole story, and I went home and I turned it on and there was nothing on it. And I had to make it all up. That taught me a lot about journalism.
Well, I can tell you one story about myself. The time I went to interview Borges, I was so scared at the idea of something like that happening that I went with 2 tape recorders. And in fact, one didn't work. And so I was very happy to have the extra one because otherwise you have to make it up as you did. Was your interview faithful or it was completely made up?
No, I left out most of the interview and actually wrote about the experience I had with the film. And which was good because it made me come to terms why I liked the film so much. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I'd never seen anybody connect story and images with music like they had done, like Dennis had done. And for me, I was very excited because I realized there was something very precious in that new connection they had found, and in that directness, and that between rock and roll and film there was a secret connection that I hadn't even realized. And for me, Dennis, Easy Rider was a turning point in my life. I realized the thrill of filmmaking was maybe in the connection. I went back the next day and put a lot of rock and roll to my first short film.
It was amazing because in those, I edited the movie I shot the movie Easy Rider in 4.5 weeks. Went all the way across country and back. But I didn't see any of my dailies. I had no way to see the film that I'd shot. So by the time I got back to Los Angeles, I had something like 70 hours of film. About 70 hours. And it took me a year to edit it. So I would play the radio on the way to the editing room, and I would hear the music off the radio, and I would just start, and as I was doing the traveling sequences, I started putting songs to it, like Goddamn the Pushing Man and Born to Be Wild, and these various things. At the end of it, all you had to do in those days, which is a much different world then, all I had, because nobody had ever used found music before, they'd always written a movie score for a movie, all I had to do was go to the artists who performed the songs and ask their permission. And I got the rights to use the music, which is a much different world than it is now. But Peter had gone to Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, who were wonderful, great musicians. And he had had them say that they would put their next album we could use their next album for all the music in the film. And anyway, I got rid of that idea by God knows what means. I won't go into it, but anyway, I wanted to use the music that I'd found for the movie. But it was something.
What was the most important thing you learned from doing Easy Rider? What was the inner revolution which it brought to your way of making films? Because certainly it was a breaking point in the history of cinema in any case. But for you, for yourself, what was the most important thing you learned from making that film?
I don't know that I learned anything from making the film. I'm 18 years old, I had gone under contract to Warner Brothers, and I wanted to be a director then. And I was 31 years old by the time I finally directed Easy Rider. So I've been waiting a long time to direct film. I want to say that Laszlo Kovacs, the cinematographer, was just amazing. He had come out of Hungary during the revolution. He had been trained in a communist school, and he was the greatest telephoto operator that I've ever seen. All the bike, we shot all that out of the back of a Chevy convertible with some of the air out of the tires and a few sandbags and Aeroflex camera, and those great shots of the wheels and up to Peter and I, and we had just an amazing communication, Laszlo and myself, because I was directing the film and also on a motorcycle. So it was. He's just an incredible. It was incredible. I could never have done it without him.
Did you start with a real script, or that things had been changing during the film, during the making of the film?
Peter and I talked and walked and talked a story. Peter called me actually from I think he was in Toronto. He was in Toronto at a film festival, and he was up with Arkoff and Nicholson, who were the head of AIP, American International Pictures, which we were all working for. Because Corman wouldn't pay us, but he would give us cameras and film, and we could go out and shoot on weekends. So Peter called me, and Peter and I were doing motorcycle movies at AIP. AIP distributed movies to the drive-in circuit. We had all these drive-in theaters, and Hollywood, the big Hollywood studios, had stayed away from the drive-in market. And AIP had found a way in by making films for the drive-in market. So motorcycle movies were part of that trip. And I made a film called The Glory Stompers. Jack Nicholson made a film called Hell's Angels on Wheels. And Peter Fonda made Wild Angels. And Peter Fonda's Wild Angels was a very big success. So he was a star at that moment. And where am I going with all this? How did I, the writing. So Peter called me we promised each other we're not going to make a motorcycle movie. So Peter read the last movie and went out to try to raise money for the last movie and said that he was going to produce it. Well, we couldn't get financing for that. Then we wrote a thing with a stand-up comic called The Yin and the Yang, which was a comedy. And we were going to do that, which Peter was going to star in. We couldn't get financing for that. So Peter finally called me from Toronto and he said, I talked to Arkoff and Nicholson. This is James Nicholson, not Jack Nicholson, no relation, but the head of the studio of AIP. And they were up there promoting a film called The Trip, which Roger Corman had directed, which Jack Nicholson had written. Jack Nicholson was at that point a writer. He was doing a little acting, but he was a wonderful writer. And I had started my first directorial job as shooting second unit for Corman on The Trip. So Peter called me and said, look, we're selling The Trip up here, and I had dinner with Arkoff and Nicholson, and I told them the story, and they said that they'd give us the movie to make the movie, give us the money to make the movie, and you can act in it and direct it, and I can produce it and act in it. So. And he said, I told him this story. There's these two guys, and they ride dirt bikes down into Mexico, and they score some drugs, and they come to Los Angeles, and they sell the drugs, and they get these big gleaming bikes, and they go right across country to Mardi Gras. They have a wonderful time at Mardi Gras, and the next day they go into like Florida, and they're shot by a couple of duck hunters. What do you think about this idea? This is 3 o'clock in the morning, by the way. And I said, Peter, are you sure they said they'd give you the money? And he said, they said they'd give me the money. And I said, Peter, that's a wonderful idea. You know? So from there, Peter and I walked and talked for probably about 10 days on his tennis court, and we talked out a whole outline for the film. And then that's the way it started. And then when I went out and found all the locations. We had to shoot in Mardi Gras first because Peter had the wrong month for Mardi Gras, so we had 2 weeks to prepare for Mardi Gras. So Schneider, well, they get so complicated, we don't have all afternoon for this. But anyway, AIP finally decides they won't let me act and direct. Bert Schneider, who's the son of Abe Schneider, Columbia Pictures, who had just made the Monkeys series with Bob Rafelson. We were over there pitching an idea for a friend of mine, a poet named Michael McClure, and we didn't get the money for that, but Peter started talking about, at that time it was called The Loners, which was Easy Rider. And we were going to do that, but they wouldn't let me act and direct it and so on. So Schneider called me that night and said, you know, I'll let you act and direct and make the picture for us. So they took money that they'd made and gave us $320,000, $330,000, $60,000, and we made the movie. But when Peter had the wrong day for Mardi Gras, wrong month for Mardi Gras, Schneider said, well, wait a second. I'll just give you enough to shoot. I'll give you $25,000 to shoot in New Orleans at Mardi Gras, and that'll be your test to see if you go on and direct the movie. So that's the way it started. And I had 5 days. I had 2 weeks to get some people together. I got 5 different directors that I knew, young directors. I shot in 16 millimeters. So the acid trip and all the footage in Easy Rider that's in New Orleans was shot in 16 millimeter, which I then blew up to 35. But I took these 5 friends because they had cameras. They had 16 millimeter cameras. They all wanted to be directors. And I said, nobody shoots any film until I tell them to. Well, every time I turned around, somebody was shooting film. And I flipped out. I flipped out so badly that my brother-in-law, who was Peter Fonda's partner and production partner, Bill Hayward, they started recording me. So when they got back to Los Angeles with the footage, they played the footage for Bert Schneider and Jack Nicholson and said, see how crazy he is, we want to give you the money back, we want to apologize for this whole thing, we'll find another director who will replace Hopper. And Schneider listened to the recording, says he sounds like he's really upset, but you know, I hired Hopper to direct this movie, and that's it. And so I went on from there and we made the film. And I then went across country, found the locations with my production manager, Paul Lewis. Well, Peter and Terry Southern were in New York supposedly writing the screenplay from our outline. When I got through finding all the locations, they hadn't written anything. So I got to New York, I took over the office, Southern's office, I got a secretary, and I dictated the script in 10 days. It was no masterpiece, but it was what Schneider wanted. And then, as Jack Nicholson says, 80% of the film was improvised anyway. So, but we had an outline, we knew where we were going, what we were going to do, we had all the, we shot in 4.5 weeks. Laszlo Kovacs said about 3 months ago at the American Film Institute, we were all there, he said he'd heard all the crazy stories about Easy Rider. He'd never been on a film before or since. It was so well made. I mean, he never had any problems making it. We shot it in 4.5 weeks, and how all these crazy stories about the excesses and so on in that film were ridiculous. So.
I was just wondering, Mr. Hopper, you've played such a variety of roles. You had so many films. Is there any other dream role for you? Is there anything you're still longing to play, or are you just looking for a good script? Or is there some special emotion you'd like to act out in a film? I haven't seen a good script in a long time. I'm usually like an alchemist. I'm trying to take shit and make gold out of it. I haven't worked in a studio. I mean, I've worked in very few studio pictures, so most of my work has been independent films, and I like to work. So if I have free time and there's a movie that I can do, I go and do it, that's it. But I work all the time, but I work in a lot of things that I'm really embarrassed about, very honestly. But I love my work, and I try to do the best job that I can do under the circumstances. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I saw your performance in Blue Velvet, it really moved me for days. So how did you react and how did you feel when you first saw it in a rough cut? Maybe you told us about it in the film, but I wasn't let in, so I didn't see it. I'm sorry for that.
Well, when I read the script, David Lynch's script, he cast me without us having ever met. And I called him from Los Angeles. We shot the film in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I called him. He was having lunch with Isabella Rossellini and Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern. And I said, I just read Blue Velvet, and David, you haven't made a mistake casting me in this part because I am Frank Booth. So he went back to the table and he said, I just got off the phone with Dennis Hopper. And he said he was Frank Booth, and I'm sure that's good for the movie, but how will we ever have lunch with him? What was the question again? Oh, how did I feel when I saw it? First of all, there was no improvisation in it because he'd written the script and I really was word for word with David. I didn't want to change the thing. When I saw it, I took a lawyer friend of mine and I saw it with a few people from the studio's executives. We were all seeing it for the first time. And my friend laughed. He started laughing at the beginning of the film, and he continued to laugh hilariously through the whole movie. Movies in the studio is giving a lot of people opportunities to make movies. So for one brief moment in Hollywood's history, the directors actually took over. The producers didn't, and so on. In the studio system, a director merely directed the movie. He didn't cast the movie, he didn't write the movie, he didn't edit the movie. He didn't put the music to the movie. That was the studio that did that. He merely came on the set and directed the movie. John Ford and Houston and a few directors would learn how to shoot. They would only shoot one close-up or 2 lines, and they would shoot 3 lines in a long shot and 2 lines in a 2-shot, and that's the way they had to edit the film. They didn't give the studio any opportunity to have any other kind of footage to edit the film. Anyway, for this brief moment in Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, we took over and we had creative freedom. I had total creative freedom on the last movie in Easy Rider, and then I was stopped. It was pointed out the other night that the only 2 that really got through all that were Spielberg and Lucas, because they were the only ones that didn't drink and take drugs. The rest of us fell in the gutter. But it was that one moment. What is it like now? Is that what is it coming back? The directors, I don't see it in Hollywood. Hollywood's all about the big weekend box office, how much money it's going to make on the weekend. If it doesn't make money on the weekend, you don't see it the next week in a theater. Also, everybody talks about the independent movie and how great the independent movies are, but independent movies, we make independent movies in the United States, we can't find theaters to show them in because the big studios have all the theaters wrapped up, and it's very difficult to get, usually go right to tape, maybe if they show it on home box office or Showtime or some television kind of thing, but you can't find theaters to play your movies in. So, in an ideal world, I would think that if you build a big Cineplex, that in the United States, that if you built 10 theaters, that 7 of those theaters would be for the big Hollywood blockbusters, you know, which would be a gamble. 3 of those theaters, one would be for foreign films, one would be for independent films, and one would be for the history of film, because we're losing our history. We're not seeing the great films that were made in the past anymore. And if you had those 3 theaters in a Cineplex, I would guarantee after a year of people being educated to know that they could go to these theaters, those theaters would be packed, and the other would still be a gamble of who's making the big weekend box office, biffo box office, you know? I think that's something, distribution is really, and theaters are really the crux of the whole thing as far as making film is concerned. Also, we're in an area where we can change the whole. I know that in the United States for $5 billion, we could change all the theaters in the United States over to digital projection. And at that point, you could merely cut out a lot of work for Teamsters and people dragging film around, but you could really actually beam up to a satellite and beam right into a theater, or you could send a little chip, and that would be it. So there's all these possibilities, but you know, you'll probably see this hopefully in the future.
He's her easy rider, and she takes care of him. He doesn't pimp her, but...
There must be an Italian word for that, but I don't know. But certainly there is.
There's probably several Italian words.
Yeah. I'm very happy to know now anyhow what exactly it is an easy rider. Well, then the two of you, at a certain point of your lives, got together. You have heard part of the story, but...
Yes, he lit it differently than ever. I've seen him light something before, and he just thought that the film needed a whole different approach. And I think it's good to be surrounded with people who don't do what they always do.
What was amazing also, there were 7 directors that you had in that film as actors.
I think there were 7. There was myself, there was Nicholas Ray, there was Gerard Blanc, Samuel Fuller, John Eustache, Mother and a Whole,
Daniel Schmidt, Peter Lilienthal.
Yeah. All those actors.
Yeah, I think I could do a lot of casting in this film because
we have 500 parts.
I cast all my director friends because, you know, there was all these gangsters in the film and all these mafiosi, and the last thing I wanted to sort of cast them the way everybody would expect they look. So I cast all the colleagues as gangsters. Because
figures.
Yes, as figures. Because they're the only ones I knew. The only gangsters, the only crooks I knew were all directors.
I thought you also have the same feeling about producers. Or some of them.
I never cast them.
But then you think sometimes they are crooks. You made it feel.
Yes, but they're bad actors. And crooks. Some of them.
Well, you know, I think that if, as a director, and I assume that I'm speaking to a lot of directors here, I think that a director encompasses all the arts as we know it right at the moment. I think that A director has to be involved in writing, he has to be involved in acting, he has to be involved in art and set design and art direction, he has to be involved in camera, music, sound. I don't think there's any of the arts that we can talk about that's not involved in making movies as a director.
As a director, I found out you also need to know a lot about being a travel agent.
There you go.
You mean for organizing the film?
Yeah, if you shoot on the road, most of the thing you do is organizing travels.
Finding out where people are
Traffic,
going to stay,
traffic.
the logistics. Right?
Yeah. Well, we even have a workshop here on bankruptcy.
Bankruptcy.
So you have to know
financing. Boy, that's
yes. You have to know about financing, and you have to know about certain legal things. Otherwise, you're lost. Don't you?
Well, I've been lost for a long time. So.
I'm telling you.
Thank you. I'm listening.
And Wim, which was your worst moment in this sense? The bankruptcy moment. What was it?
Let's not talk about it.
Okay.
Save it for the workshop. No, that's somebody else. That's Nick Powell who's doing that. He knows even more than I do about that.
Things didn't go wrong, but I never taught. And my friend Peter Eaton from Frankfurt said that if I would come to the university in Frankfurt and that there were young actors there, and they wanted to know about Strasberg and about method acting, and he wanted to know if I would come for 2 weeks and teach them about acting, about Lee Strasberg method acting, and that's basically how I got to Frankfurt and the footage that you're looking at, which I think was 12 years ago, when something like that, 10, 12, and. It was a great experience for me. I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, I loved it actually.
And does it inspire you when you're acting somehow with things that you've learned through these workshops or through the contact with young actors and actresses? Does it inspire you on your own acting afterwards?
No, I don't think so. I hope it inspired them.
My question on Mr. Wenders is, I would like to know if when you have the screenplay finished and one day before shooting, or if you know how the whole shooting process is going to work. And I would like to know if you do that, if you know from the beginning, and how the film is going to end, and how was your experience on Buena Vista Social Club?
I don't know, it never happened to me that the script was finished and we would have it at the first day of shooting. Because I always thought that as good as the script may be, and I made some movies with good scripts and I made some movies with no script whatsoever, I made movies with just one page. But I always thought, and that's what I found out on my fourth film, where I realized this was my profession, filmmaking. I could do something with it, and I could stick with it, and it was beautiful. But only when I realized that the script and whatever conception that anybody had, including myself, before that first day of shooting, was really not so important, and that the only thing that mattered was when you were there with your actors in the location you were shooting, what was happening then. And sometimes, if you have a script, as good as it is, it might make you blind for your actors and for the place and for the truth of the situation. So I've always maintained that it was very important that I stick to it, that however, if you have a good script or a bad script, but that you could be in a position to change it, to stick to it also sometimes, but also change it, or also just take a very different approach to it, because you don't know when you're writing what really the truth of that situation is. So I've found it was utterly important that as a director you have that liberty to not do it and to rewrite your script. And maybe Dennis and I both started making movies at a time when that was very acceptable. And I'm really sad to see that more and more that is less acceptable, and that today I know even cases where films were refused by producers or co-producers because there was a line different than in the script, and that was reason enough to not accept the delivery of the film, which is a disaster. I mean, I would have to stop making movies tomorrow if that became the rule, because I think it's utterly important that you have the liberty to let your actors and your DP and your crew have an influence, and yourself as a director. And if you're just executing somebody's storyboard or some script that was written and agreed on and signed, if you're just executing, it's just executing it, then I don't think that somebody else would have to do it, but not me, because I'm not good at that. I'm not good at just if I feel the film is already finished before I even started, which is an industrial approach, and it's an approach that is often done today. A lot of movies in Hollywood are made like this. They exist completely finished before the first day of shooting. You just have to go through the motions. I could never do that. I wouldn't know how to do that. I would be very, very bad at it.
While in Cancun to Havana, I was trying to make up a concept. But I forgot it the moment I got out of the plane, because the place didn't need a concept. The place wanted me to be open for it, and the music was the concept, and to be true to it. And these people, was so amazing, there was nothing to add. I mean, I tried not to add anything. I just tried to capture as much as possible. But you see, when you do a documentary, you need a very different approach, a different mindset from the beginning. You really want to make whatever is in front of your camera the main thing. You want to honor that, and you want that to become the focus, and you want that to translate to the audience, and you really want to step back as much as possible. At least that's how I feel about documentaries. I made other films that you might call documentaries where that wasn't the case, but I never called them documentaries, I called them diaries. You can also make films in a very personal way, where you expose your own subjective view of things, but that shouldn't be called a documentary. So I called them diaries, which is a very different form and an interesting form, but really has nothing to do with documentaries.
You know, so let me add something. It's very difficult if you have a script and it says the script, you're sitting and you write about robbing a grocery store. Well, that's fine. But the grocery store, when you get to shoot it, you find a grocery store that's not like the grocery store that you wrote about. And the people that are playing the parts are not really like the people that you wrote about. And the cinematographer has ideas, and things have to be loose enough to be able to change and to be creative. Also, it's interesting that in the 20th century, the greatest film that in my mind, that I ever saw, and the first time that literature and film ever really married, was Wind Over Berlin, or Wings of Desire, I'm not sure. It's the first time that literature ever and film ever really married to me. And it's great to hear you say that literature was not what you were making a film. But when I see that film, it has such great literature in it. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you. You should have told me that before, so I wouldn't have blushed.
I think I have told you that before.
Did I blush?
There are some questions there.
Just a couple of things, actually. For Mr. Hopper, based on some of the examples we just saw, some of the most interesting work you've been involved in, like Easy Rider and Apocalypse, have come at times of conflict, it seems, in your life. And I just want to know, both of you, what you think the correlation is between really great, interesting art and conflict.
Well, I mean, drugs and alcohol work for 1 minute, and then because if you're shy or whatever, they suddenly will liberate you so you can be more free. But then pretty soon you're working for the drugs and the alcohol. But primarily, I was interested in acting and interested in film, directing, so that was it. When I got sober, I did Blue Velvet, Hoosiers, which we didn't see in this, but it's the same year, Blue Velvet, Hoosiers, and River's Edge. And I was nominated for the only Academy Award as an actor for Hoosiers. So those 3 films I made back to back, and I was totally sober. So alcohol and drugs are a crutch. You know, you can either cut the mustard or you can't, and they might be very liberating for a moment, but after a while they're not liberating at all. And so, as far as chaos and conflict is concerned, I think that a troubled being, a troubled soul that needs to express itself doesn't have to be drunk or on drugs. That's something that the things that you just have to work with, and those are creative tools. I think that hate and love both are creative things, that if we take these things and make them, rather than attacking other people and doing those things, that we take those things and use them and learn how to use them as tools to create with, they're very powerful. Sex, hate, love, these things are very powerful tools to be able to utilize and put into our work, and there's conflict and chaos involved in just living. And I think that I think it's important for us to know who we are and what we're about, and we'll find trouble inside us, but and that will come out, and we'll express that in what we do in film.
I think conflict is the very source of creativity. And conflict means that you have to make decisions, or that you have to find out what the truth is. And I think filmmaking is one of the most privileged ways to find the truth of something. And there is nothing that really makes you so comfortable, and nothing that is so pacifying and reassuring than if you realize you're onto something true. And that you're about to, with a film, explore the truth of a thing. If it's a story, whatever it is. If you start the film in a turmoil and in a conflict, the very fact that you are onto the truth gives you all the reassurance and all the calms you can possibly find, because there's nothing more reassuring and comfortable in the world than the truth.
And Mr. Hopper, I'm just going to try and shoot a movie this week. I have a perfect role for you if you want to talk afterwards.
I think one of the great stories about that is when you're directing Hammond for Francis Ford Coppola, and Francis stops you in the middle of shooting. And rather than putting your tail between your legs and going home, you went off and made State of Things, and then went back and finished Hammond after that, which was actually about I guess about the making of Hammond in an abstract way. But I'll always remember that as I was thinking, boy, that's the way to go if you can do it. And I know it wasn't easy, but that was a terrific creative moment.
It's true, I was totally lost. I was in the conflict, and if you're in the middle of the conflict, sometimes you have no way to see the truth. But if you make a film, then you can find out things. And in order to survive Hammond, I had to make this other film in between. And also in order to sort of stay friends with Francis, which we did after all. And in a way, that's the most amazing thing about the adventure, that we still respect each other, but I had to make that other movie in order to get it out of my system.
Yeah, I'm here one-on-one. Mr. share the same birthday, so I've kept my eye on you for a long time. And there's some rumor that you vote Republican. Is that and,
You're right. I for years, my whole family were all Democrats, and I thought we were getting a little too. At one point, I decided to become a Republican. I mean, become a Republican. Listen, man, you know, as if I was a Democrat. So, like, you know, but I did. I voted for Bush. You know. But I don't think this is a place to really get into that number right at the moment. This is like, you know. But I mean, go ahead if you want.
no, but I wanted to clear that up. And for my
How did you
astrology.
clear that up?
I'll write you about it.
You must have the same birthday.
So when is this birthday?
May 17th.
With Eric's at T.
And she's 66 years old.
Leo rising. For Mr. Wim Wenders, I just rented.
My birthday is in August.
A card is on the way. Alice. Sorry.
And I didn't vote CDU.
Before I came, I rented Alice in the Cities, and I was so...
Where did you get that?
Kim's Video in the East Village.
It's strictly illegal.
What amazed me is that you made this film, and now thinking of what's going on, that there was a possibility of pedophilia between the characters, and that did it occur to you? Was that frightening? To put that situation is so brave.
You're the first person who mentions that. Never struck me.
A man alone with a little girl in a hotel, given complete, care of her.
Do you know the Latin expression?
Well, Michael Jackson would get one into problems, but not me.
Then how did you sort out the character so that it wouldn't even have occurred to you that this might be a man who would...
Because I knew the two. The actor, Rüdiger Vogler, and the little girl, Jella, played two parts. She played an important part. She played Little Pearl in Scarlet Letter, and Rüdiger played a sailor, really a little side part. And that entire experience of this costume movie in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong cast, and the wrong director, was so painful that I really thoroughly enjoyed the 3 or 4 little moments that felt good. And they were all with the little girl, and they were all with Rüdiger, who played the sailor. So in the midst of this real trauma, which the entire film was a traumatic experience, I hold on to the 2 or 3 moments that were good. And I swore myself, as soon as I get out of this alive, I think I'll make a film just with these 2. So the desire to make the movie started with these 2 actors, or well, with the actor, and Jella was just 7 years old. And still while I was editing it, I started to write a story that would just be about the 2 of them. And knowing them so well, and loving them both so much, made it just the easiest thing in the world. It came out of them. I didn't have to invent the characters. I knew the characters. And so nothing ever crossed my mind. And only when the film was finished, no, I remember now. We were negotiating with several airlines to fly from New York over back to Europe, because we needed some cooperation with an airline to work with us. I needed to shoot in the plane, and we could only shoot while we were flying. I didn't think you could shoot in a plane that was standing somewhere, so it had to be flying. So we were talking to several airlines, and they said, send the script. And I remember 2 of them refused to let us shoot because they felt there was something fishy about the story of this grown-up man traveling with this little girl. And that's where it hit me for the first time that such an angle existed. But it was so out of the question, knowing them two so well, and I think that the film sort of erased any suspicion.
It's so successful because it does do that, and she seems as if she's a part of him. She's a reflection of him. It's beautiful, but it was brave anyway.
It was brave of hers, certainly. You might see the 2 of them one more time in a little scene. 20 years later, they appear together in Far Away So Close. And I didn't tell Rudiger that very secretly Jella had come to appear as his guardian angel, and he only realized it when we were already shooting. She came out into the light, and he stared at her, and then he recognized her slowly. She was by now 30 years old.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, this is a question for both of you as directors. I'm wondering how the process of filmmaking affects your own experience of your own life. Does it orient you into, the experience of your life, or does it detach you? How has it affected your own experience?
I think I can safely say that I would not remotely be who I am today if I had learned from film to film to film to understand the world better and understand myself better. And I think the fantastic privilege of a filmmaker is that, as Dennis pointed it out before, that it touches not only on all the arts, but you're also dealing with experiences, and you can actually start a film in order to find out something about something, or even about yourself. Like I did State of Things in order to find out how I felt about having failed in Hollywood. And so I'm not necessarily saying that you want to expose private stuff in a film, because I think it's really bullshit. But there's a very fine line between private and personal. And I really believe that the only stories worth telling to other people, and that the only thing that really communicates, is personal and is based on experience. And I don't know, I'm still learning from every film, and I'm happy to see films where I realize that people made them with whatever means. Very small budget films, or even sometimes bigger films, but the rule is that the bigger the film, the less you can count on somebody having made an experience with it. And that's why I'm so much in favor of young people shooting digital means, because it means they are free to make the experience. As soon as you have more money, and as soon as you have more constraints, you are not allowed to make experiences, you're allowed to execute something.
But in the searching and the researching, like recherche, like when you're going over a moment over and over and over again, does that affect your present moment, you, and your ability to experience it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would be a very shy, boring, I don't know what I would be. I probably would be selling tickets out there. No, not even. I might be a lawyer.
Yes, but a lawyer or a ticket seller can experience the present moment and enjoy it.
Yes, but I'm not trying to put anybody down. I'm just saying, in order to be creative, you have to expose yourself, and you have to come to terms with a lot of things, because otherwise you just cannot continue. And I think filmmaking is a fantastic thing to come to terms with issues and come to terms with relationships and to learn. I think there's no better way than to learn. I think writers, for instance, have a very difficult time to learn because they're always more or less in this very small, defined little world, and it's the computer or the typewriter. And we get out, we get to work with lots of people. And you have this idea in the very beginning, or you have this dream, and it's like a candle and you're carrying it, and in between you have to give it to your actor, and you have to give it to your cameraman, and you're there just watching that they don't blow it out. But I mean, it passes through all these hands, and that's an incredible act too, that you have to take something from yourself, and you have to trust people with it. Filmmaking is more than anything is about trust. And I wasn't a trusting person when I started to make movies. I learned a lot about trust and about love from making films and from sharing.
Thank you.
You know, for over 45 years, I've talked about the fact that in Hollywood we're chapel builders. You know, that we have, like, you know, you have so many people on your crew, and electricians and the lights and all the things that you need to haul the big equipment around and so on. And I said, someday we'll come into a time of the easel painter. And that time has come now. And you're very fortunate to live in this period of time, because the digital experience allows you to be able not to have to go out and get millions and millions and millions of dollars to try to raise it, but in point of fact, for somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000, you can make a feature-length film, a feature-length digital, I don't know what to call it, digital film. Okay. And then you could probably, for about $140,000, if you get a theatrical release, blow it up to 35 millimeter at this point, which was what you'd have to do. But at that point, you have only about $160,000 invested, rather than the $4 or $5 million, the low budget end of things at this point in our business. That's a big advantage to people. And also, who said that a movie has to be an hour and a half long? You know, I went out and made a little digital thing that's 8.5 minutes long, about a homeless woman that lives on Venice Beach, and it was a wonderful experience for me. And I went out in the morning. I had a cameraman, just cameraman and myself, and I wanted to get the woman waking up in the morning, so I got up about 5 o'clock, and the sun came up around 6, and by 8 o'clock, 2 hours later, I said to my cameraman, I said, you know, it's really amazing. I always prided myself as a director, as a film director, that I could get 27 setups or more a day. And I thought that was really incredible. I said, I wonder how many I have by this point, 2 hours into this. And he said, oh, I've written it down. You have 70. Because all I had to do was move it from one angle to another angle. I didn't have to move 1,000 lights and 1,000 electricians and da-da-da and whatever to build this amazing chapel, but I could just merely move the camera. And it's a great thing, a great time that you live in, to be able to work and experiment, and even if they're only like drawings of something that you will do later, the digital world is a wonderful world to experiment in and to play in. Anyway.
And futurism, because you did the film till the end of the world at the beginning of your career. I mean, I'm so young, so I know what that is. So I'm wondering, why did you just leave that interest, or I didn't notice any kind of futuristic story. It was so good. It's different. It's not like science fiction, ordinary science fiction movies. So, like a young one, you know, I could learn.
Well, I wasn't that young when I shot Until the End of the World, which is the only science fiction film I ever did. And I made one big mistake. I put the film in into the near future. Actually, the film took place in the year 2001. So I give you a good advice: if ever you make a science fiction film, don't put it in a time when time can catch up with you. Put it further on. I have a project, I have a science fiction project for much further in time. And I like science fiction a lot, but it doesn't interest me I'm not interested in the technology aspect of it so much. I'm really interested in how people might change and how relations might change and how behavior might change. And if you look at the great science fiction stories, or even if you look at bad science fiction movies, you realize they're really about the time they were made in. They took place in the future, okay, but everything in the film is about that era where it was made. Every science fiction film defines its own time, and not so much the future. And I like fun science fiction for that, and I hope one day I can make another one, but this one was such a difficult experience, and I mean, one of my big failures, as I was talking about failures before, because it was by far the most expensive thing I've ever done in my life. The film costed $20 million, which was in 1990 a lot of money for a European film. And then it failed because I had made a film that was way too long. It was an epic story. My own cut last 5 hours, and the distributors insisted on the contract, and I had to cut it down to 2.5, so it became sort of a Reader's Digest of what I had intended. And that was a sad story. But I still like the idea of projecting myself into the future. The future interests me so much more than the past. I think I can safely say I will never make a film again that takes place in the past. I'm just not gifted for that.
Nice to know how is going the people in the war. They're like in low life conditions. And are there is any chance for any movie to do some influence on humanity? That's it. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to make a film for a long time about a hot dog vendor who sells hot dogs, Mexican, that I watched down on Venice Beach. There is no hot dog vendor in Venice Beach, but I live on Venice Beach, or near Venice Beach. And I always thought that a hot dog guy that sells hot dogs and a flower girl that sells flowers on 3rd Avenue, that world of street performers and homeless people and surfers and the affluent joggers and the various nationalities and the mix of people that we have in Venice. I live in a very poor area, which is Venice is a suburb of Los Angeles, beach area, downtrodden beach area. But I could see all of humanity there, and I thought a love story between the hot dog vendor and the girl that sells flowers, another Mexican who are immigrants who have come illegally into the United States, the problems that they had trying to find their way, and their concern with the homeless, and they're trying to take care of the people in the streets, and their understanding of these performers and people like that paint themselves silver and stand still for hours or juggle chainsaws, and people that we walk by that we never see, that we sort of look the other way. We don't want to look at the homeless person. We don't want to look at the person pushing the cart. We don't want to look at these, we'll look at their performance, but we don't want to look at them after that. We don't want to know these people. The discarded people and so on, and the many different nationalities and ethnic backgrounds. That's something that's fascinating me that I've been thinking about for probably maybe 15 years, something like that. I made this little 8-minute digital thing, but that's what I would like to make. Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. And that encompasses a lot of things for me. And again, it's what I think, what I ignore in my life, the things that I don't know, that I walk by every day, that I don't really know about. I don't really know about being homeless. I really don't know about being a street performer. I really don't know about having to come into the United States without having, you know, a passport or having any way back to where I came from and how I'm going to make it there. I mean, these are things that interest me, that fascinate me, and that's what I would like to make a film about.
Thank you. We are allowed 2 more questions, so we say yes, yes, you, and you.
Very quickly say something about the war thing.
Yes.
Right now, because I think it's a great question, and as a filmmaker, obviously, you'd have to ask yourself that question these days. But whenever I think about any movie I've seen about war, I come to the same conclusion. That films have that inbuilt thing that they perpetuate whatever they depict. And I have not seen yet a film about war that in some way or another doesn't perpetuate it. So I think the only way as a filmmaker for myself to react is to make a film about the opposite, to make a film about peace. And that is really the only thing we can do. I mean, look at all of these war movies. Look at each and every one of them. In the end, they make you ready to watch images of war. And that's what it comes down to. So I prefer to rather develop a counter-image, as war is an obscene state of absence of respect and of love. So I think the only thing you can do is project the opposite. And that is, I think, the only reason for filmmaking, the only way you can really do something against it. Because otherwise you have to make other things. You can go into politics, you can go into the street and protest, but as a filmmaker, I think you can just state the contrary.
I'm Gemini. I'm fine. I've got a dream in my pocket, and that is the urgent wish to act. And I'm going to move to LA next month, and I'm going to move to Venice Beach, actually, which is funny. But I've got a question. I just want to know what would you recommend someone who wants to act? What would you recommend them? Where to go? Who to ask? Or if you really want to get a foot into the business, I find it quite difficult here in Germany because you only find an agent when you've got material, but you can't get material if you don't have someone who knows. So, what would you recommend?
Maybe she could start working at that hot dog stand.
Yeah, there isn't one.
There isn't one.
I think that, well, first of all, when I came to Los Angeles at 18 years old, you couldn't get an agent unless you had a Screen Actors Guild card. And you couldn't get a Screen Actors Guild card unless you got into a major studio. In the studios, there was no independent films in those days. They were the Warner Brothers, Paramount, 20th Century Fox, so you couldn't get inside the studio without an agent, and you couldn't get a Screen Actors Guild card unless you worked in a movie. So, I mean, there was no way, really, to get through that anyway. You can find a way. I think the best thing to do is find out where actors hang out and where actors go. And usually that's little theaters. And whether you like the theater or not, because I couldn't wait to get out of the theater and be in movies, because I wanted to be in movies,
It's a place that you can showcase yourself, and it's a place where you can learn to act. If you want to be an actor, you've got to learn how to act. And by acting, you need the experience of acting. And that's a different world now, because you have digital things that you can do, and you have people that you can put together. You can make a digital thing. You can make a reel of yourself with a young director or whatever, showing your abilities as an actor. Where you study, what you learn, where you need to have somebody that can instruct you in some way and tell you the no-nos and the yay-yays of what they think acting is. That's a person that you should really pick with a lot of care, because they can give you a lot of bad ideas. There's nothing worse than having a trained actor that's been trained in preconceived ideas, in my mind. Because there's no improvisation with them, there's no give and take, there's just what they're doing, and that's it. And you either get into their mode or you're finished. So you need to go and hang. If you want to be a painter, you got to go where they're painters. If you want to, or find some canvas, whatever. So you need to be able to work, and I think digital right now would probably be a really good way. You can make a reel of yourself. You can show it to an agent.
Is there any place you know in LA
or to study? To study?
Yeah, where I can meet people like that.
I don't know of anywhere in LA. There are places in New York, very honestly, that have teachers, people that studied with Strasberg, or studied with Sandy Meisner, or studied with Stella Adler. These are the people that I would recommend that you study with. I can't give you a name right now, but they're mostly in New York. I don't know anyone in Los Angeles, but I'm a little out of touch in that area right at the moment. So.
But there are small theaters in Los Angeles.
There are small theaters, yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of actors. Get a job as a waitress, and you'll find all the other waiters are actors.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, good luck.
I'm an eternal optimist, so I would answer your question with a completely optimistic response. Because on one hand you see, all through the 90s and right now, that on one hand movies get more spectacular and more expensive and louder and more bizarre and filled with so much noise, and the noisier they get and the more spectacular they get, you realize the emptier they are. And I think there is an enormous hunger, a real hunger that films deal with something again, and they deal with content. And I think you see first signs for a couple of years already, all of a sudden documentaries are played that deal with issues, and they don't deal with form. They give a shit if it looks great. And for a while, especially in the 90s, it was all about the looks, and it was all about the special effects. And I see that will continue, and soon films will cost $1 billion, some great big blockbusters, but they will. I'm not worried about those. They're going to continue to exist. But I'm very sure that parallel to that, we're seeing right now an incredible revolution, and we just see the tip of the iceberg, and every sort of film will exist again in the near future. Documentaries, authors' films, diaries, B-movies, even forms we don't even know yet, that are based on content. And content is the only thing that Hollywood is not able to deliver. Very rarely. I shouldn't say not, because every now and then they do. And every now and then there is a movie like The Hours, for instance, which I just saw, which I think is fabulous. But mainly they don't give a shit about content. It's all about bamboozling and razzle-dazzle, to quote another movie. But I think there is an incredible hunger out there for something else that answers questions and deals with issues and content. And I don't think that there's ever been a generation more privileged than yours to fulfill that need and to go and work with here's the narrow gate that you still have to go through, because you still have to blow up your digital movies to film, and you still have to find a distributor, and you still have to go through the same damn narrow door. That narrow door will be wide open very soon, as soon as there's digital projection available. And it doesn't even have to be the same circuits, it could be other circuits. And I really envy you, all of you here, that is the future, because you can start telling things that are important again. And I'm really optimistic that it will happen in the very near future.
Thank you.
And last but not least, the real last question.
It's been almost 60 years since Alexandra Struck wrote the cinema style text. And I think we are really near to see this happening thanks to digital films and computers and new topics getting into the cinema and some kind of forgetting about the narrative, the dominating narratives. How do you feel about digital film and interactive narratives? What are your thoughts about it? Not economically, but creatively. I think Peter Greenaway is doing a project which is basically based on the internet, and it has something like 92 different endings.
Is that where the audience interacts with the film?
It could be the audience, or it could be just a single user. It could also be like in a computer, or, it's just possibilities, but I want to know, what are your thoughts on this possible future of cinema, digital cinema?
I think that is not the future of cinema. I think movies as such are interactive anyway, because they only happen. A film only exists if you see it. It's not there when it's on the screen, it's because you see it. And all of you see a different movie already anyway, except if you sit in those noisy movies that force you to see all the same film. But there's other movies where each of you is allowed to see a different film. So movies at their best are already interactive. And you are already the co-author. And I love films that make the audience the co-author. And if I'm sitting in a movie where I feel it is open, I can enter, I can bring myself in, I can bring my memories in, I can bring my emotions in, I'm filled. And that happens more with small movies and poor movies than with big movies. So I think movies in that sense are already interactive. I'm not so sure whether the choice of different endings or whether the choice of rerouting the story, if that is so satisfying. I almost feel that it's more like a passing thing because technology allows it. But I must say at this moment, I don't think it's a real option to storytelling, because in a way it makes storytelling obsolete if you can choose how the story goes on. So I'm hesitant to believe that it's anything than a passing fancy.
Novelty.
Yeah, it's a novelty. It might, I don't know, I might be surprised. When the Lumiere brothers first made movies, they thought it was an attraction for fairgrounds. They did not believe they had invented something that was more suitable than to be a fairground attraction. They seriously didn't think it would go where it went. So I might be wrong about interactivity, but I just think that storytelling as a need, because people need and want stories, I think, is not really compatible with interactivity.
I think I'm about finished.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Do you have the feeling they are on a good way with the questions they had for you, or do you think these are new questions or questions you ask yourself your whole life maybe through as a filmmaker?
Questions must be very hard to come up with.
So you look great, Mr. Hopper, with this
Thank you.
glasses. Where do you go now?
Where do I go now? I go back to Los Angeles. I just was here for the day.
Okay. Will you direct another film there?
I hope so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So just one question, what is your advice for all these young people? If you had one advice for their future in film business, what would it be?
To get together and make films. That's what it's about.
And how?
How?
What is the most
Well, you have
important?
digital now. You can start with that. You know? That's what I feel.
So you need to be courageous, or you need just brave, or what do you
You
need?
just need to to find yourself and to go. You need to make pictures. You know. And by doing that, if you have digital, if you can do that with friends and take it seriously. Don't. It's, you know, everybody has a digital camera. Everybody has a camera. But if you take it and use it seriously and use it as you would if you were making a film with a little story and so on, if that's what you want to do, then you treat it seriously and you can do it. You can do it with your friends. Do it with other people of like minds. Get with people who want to make films, like you are here. Get with people who want to act in your films. Find a network of people that will work. We all start out the same place, right? We all start out with no money, no way to do it. So the only way to do it is films are not made by one person, they're made by a group of people. So you need to have friends, you need to have other people to work with, and that's what's important.
Thanks.
Vier Hermann.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank und Gesundheit, Mr. Hopper. Und vor allen Dingen, ja.
Thanks. In the film, we heard that what we see on the screen is not real. You said what is in the audience is real. That's upside down from what people usually think. Do you comment on that?
Okay. No, I just mean that, we go into a movie theater, and most of the time if it's a good film, we're totally involved in it. We give ourselves over to it and we believe it. And when I made the last movie, I was telling you about the last movie, I wanted to break down that reality, so every time I got you believing that something was happening on the screen, I wanted to show you that it was really a movie. But I said what's real is what's in the theater. The people here are real. What's up there on the screen is all make-believe. It's imaginary given circumstances. It doesn't have any reality. I mean, it may change the way you feel about things, but you're the one that's important sitting in the audience, not the thing that's on the screen.
With the division of labor in the industry of filmmaking, do you think it really kills creativity?
Well, creativity comes from people, from individuals, like-minded, like-thinking people that get together and make films. That's a creative act. Some of the industry films are very intelligent and I think very creative in a lot of ways. But the personal films that Wim Wenders is talking about, the kind of personal films that I like, these are made by people like the people in this audience. They're not made by Hollywood. And those personal stories are wonderful, and we should be able to see them. We should be able to distribute them. We don't just make films for our friends and for ourselves. We hopefully make films for a large audience. That's what we want to do. And with that comes money and comes things that may cause you problems. But the point is to keep with your personal activities, your personal stories. Like Wim's done. Wim's a great example of what a filmmaker should be in my mind.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks. Good luck.
Ciao.
Personal films should be made more often, what I really like. Should not only make films for your friends, for a bigger audience. Wim is a great example.
Where do you live in Munich? Oh yeah, great.
Mr. Hopper, can I have autograph, please? I have nice picture. And here, in the white, please.
I have to stop. Okay.
And the last, please.
Okay.
Thank you, all the best.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
Okay.